Margaret had always been a creature of habit. At 60, her life unfolded in a predictable cadence, one she had meticulously crafted to bring herself tranquility after decades of nurturing children, working, and managing a household. Twice a week, she would gather her swimming gear, carefully rolling her towel and swimsuit before making the brief walk to the local pool. The water had always been a sanctuary for her, a chance to escape into a rhythm of strokes and splashes, her body slicing through the water, a realm where time seemed to pause. The pool was mostly serene during the early hours she favored. The gentle hum of the pool's filtration system, the occasional splash of another swimmer, and the soft lapping of water against the tiles were calming. Margaret appreciated the stillness and how it contrasted with the clamor that had filled most of her life. She would swim her laps methodically, her breathing steady, the cool water a familiar comfort against her skin. This had been her ritual for the past few years, ever since she discovered that swimming could help alleviate the persistent stiffness in her joints. But everything shifted the day she encountered James, the new swimming instructor at the pool. James was in his late 20s, with a tall, athletic frame and an easy smile. Margaret had noticed him on her first day back after a brief hiatus, leading a class of children at the far end of the pool. His voice was kind yet authoritative, guiding the kids with patience. After the class, she saw him in passing as she dried her hair near the lockers. He offered her a polite nod, acknowledging her presence, but nothing more. Margaret didn't think much of it at the time. Young people came and went at the pool all the time, and their lives rarely intersected with hers. The next time she visited the pool, Margaret found herself more intrigued than usual about the young instructor she had observed from a distance. After completing her usual set of laps, she dried off by the poolside and, on a whim, approached him as he packed up some equipment. "Hi there, you're the new instructor, right? If you enjoyed this video, consider liking my video," Margaret said, her voice steady but tinged with hesitation. James looked up from his gear, surprised by her approach, but greeted her with a bright, respectful smile. "Yeah, that's right. You swim here pretty regularly, don't you?" Margaret blinked, taken aback that he had noticed her routine. "Yes, I do," she replied, feeling a bit self-conscious. She wasn't accustomed to being the focus of anyone's attention, especially someone so young. James nodded, his expression turning contemplative as he glanced toward the water. "You've got a really smooth stroke," he said, genuinely impressed. "Have you ever considered joining one of our adult swim classes? I think you'd excel in one." Margaret smiled, shaking her head lightly. "Oh no, I'm not competitive at all. I just swim for the peace it brings me." James's smile broadened, and he leaned slightly against the railing. "I understand. Still, it's impressive. You've got great form, better than most." Margaret felt a warm blush creep across her cheeks, flattered in a way she hadn't anticipated. Their conversation didn't last much longer, but something about it lingered with Margaret after she left the pool that day. She hadn't been complimented on anything physical in a long time, and the warmth of his words stayed with her. Over the following weeks, their interactions became more frequent. James would greet her upon her arrival, offer tips on her stroke, and occasionally even swim alongside her for a lap or two. Their conversations evolved from casual exchanges about swimming techniques to more personal topics. Margaret found herself eagerly anticipating his presence, a feeling that both thrilled and unsettled her. One evening, after a particularly strenuous session in the pool, Margaret lingered longer than usual in the changing room. She was towel drying her hair when she heard the familiar sound of footsteps approaching. To her surprise, it was James. "Hey," he said, leaning against the doorframe, his smile soft but different, more intimate than before. "I was hoping I'd catch you before you left." Margaret felt her heart race. "Oh, what's on your mind?" she asked, trying to sound casual, though the tension between them was palpable. "I don't know," James replied, taking a step closer, his eyes searching hers. "I just wanted to talk." His voice was low, steady, but there was something in his tone that felt weighty, more deliberate. Before she could think too much, James reached out, his fingers gently brushing a damp strand of her hair behind her ear. "Don't miss out on the journey to 1,000 subscribers. Hit that subscribe button now and be part of something big before everyone else." His touch was tender, yet it sent a shiver down her spine. "You look beautiful like this," he murmured, his voice soft, almost as if he wasn't sure whether he should say the words. Margaret felt a wave of uncertainty wash over her, but before she could respond, James closed the space between them even more. Slowly, almost cautiously, he slipped his hands to her shoulders, fingers lightly grazing the edges of her towel. Her breath caught in her throat as she felt him pause for a moment, giving her a chance to say something, to stop this. But she didn't. Instead, she stood frozen, conflicted but undeniably drawn to him. With a quiet, gentle movement, James brushed the towel aside, his hands brushing against her skin in a way that sent warmth rushing through her body. Margaret exhaled shakily, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts, but her body seemed to have already made the decision. She reached for him, her fingers trembling as they found his shirt, pulling him closer, and in that quiet, intimate space, everything else melted away. Margaret felt her breath catch in her throat. She hadn't felt such a connection in years, and certainly not with someone like James. "James, she began, but she didn't finish the sentence. She wasn't even sure what she was going to say. He didn't let her finish. Instead, he leaned in, his lips brushing hers gently, testing the waters. Margaret froze for a second, her mind racing, but then, against all her expectations, she kissed him back. There was something about the moment, about the quiet intimacy of the changing room, that made everything else fall away. After that first kiss, things between Margaret and James transformed. Their connection deepened, evolving into something more than casual conversations by the pool. They began to spend more time together, both in and out of the water. Sometimes after her swim, they would meet in the changing room, where shared laughter and fleeting touches became their bond. It felt surreal to Margaret, being with someone so much younger, someone who made her feel alive in a way she hadn't felt in years. But as their relationship flourished, so did Margaret's doubts. She often found herself questioning what James saw in her, a woman more than twice his age. She pondered whether it was fair to him, to herself. She loved how he made her feel, cherished, valued, but there was an underlying fear that one day, the reality of their age difference would catch up to them, and the fantasy they were living would unravel. James, on the other hand, never seemed to harbor any doubts. He was patient with her insecurities, always reassuring her with quiet words and gentle gestures. "I'm with you because I want to be," he told her one night after they had shared another quiet moment in the changing room. "Age doesn't matter to me, you matter to me." His words were a balm to her worries, at least for a while. Margaret found herself surrendering more and more to their relationship, allowing herself to be vulnerable in a way she hadn't been in years. She had always been the caretaker, the responsible one, but with James she felt like she could let go, taken care of for once. Their emotional connection became more intense as the weeks passed. The changing room, once a mundane place where she prepared for her swims, had now become a sanctuary for their shared moments. The sound of water dripping from the pool, the echo of their whispers, the feel of his hand on her shoulder, it was intoxicating. Margaret had never imagined she would find herself in such a situation, much less enjoy it as much as she did. But despite the growing bond between them, Margaret couldn't shake the feeling that their time together was fleeting. She had lived long enough to know that some things, no matter how wonderful, were not meant to last forever. Still, she tried to push those thoughts aside, focusing instead on the present, on the way James made her feel. One evening, after a particularly intense conversation in the changing room, Margaret lay back against the cold tile, her breathing heavy, James beside her. "I don't know how long we can keep this up," she said, her voice soft but tinged with the worry she had been trying to suppress. James turned to her, his brow furrowing. "What do you mean I mean this?" She gestured between them. "Us, it's not exactly normal, is it?" James frowned, but then his expression softened. He reached out, brushing his fingers along her cheek. "Does it have to be normal? I care about you, Margaret. That's all that matters to me." His words soothed her, if only for the moment. Margaret knew that eventually, reality would catch up to them, but for now, she was content to let herself be swept away by the strange, beautiful connection they had found in the most unexpected of places. The water, the pool, the changing room, these had been her sanctuary before, but now they held new meaning, infused with the intensity of their relationship. Margaret didn't know what the future held for them, But for the first time in a long while, she was willing to let go and let life surprise her. And so, for the time being, they continued their dance. Two individuals from very different worlds, discovering something unexpected, something precious, in the quiet spaces between their routines. The pool, with its familiar sounds and sights, had become the backdrop for a narrative Margaret never thought she'd experience, but one she was grateful to have, no matter how long it lasted. Each encounter was filled with laughter and shared stories, moments that made her feel youthful again, reminding her of the joy of connection. Margaret treasured these times, knowing that they were crafting memories that would linger long after their paths diverged.